Have you ever picked up a stranger who might not even exist? Back in 2020, when the world was locked down and people were losing jobs left and right, I found myself driving for Uber to pay the bills and keep my daughter fed. Night after night, I rolled through empty streets thinking the scariest thing I'd face would be drunk college kids or awkward conversations. But one October night, I picked up a man who changed everything I thought I knew about reality and made me question if I'd just become a character in my own true horror story. The man's name was Derek. At least that's what the app said. But after that night, I'm not sure he was ever real. He was tall, silent, staring at me through the rearview mirror like he was trying to memorize my soul. And the words he whispered before disappearing still echo in my head. You picked the wrong guy up tonight. This is one of those creepy true stories that keeps me up at 3 a.m. And if you're into real-life horror, unexplained mysteries, and rideshare nightmares, you're gonna want to stick around. Because this isn't just a rideshare horror story. It's a glitch in reality that might make you question whether your next passenger or your next driver could be something far more terrifying than human. The ping on my phone came just as I was pulling out of a hotel driveway, the glow of the screen lighting up the dark interior of my car like a warning flare. It said the passenger's name was Derek Pickup at a bowling alley 6 minutes away. Another late-night ride, I thought. No big deal. I'd done 100 of these. But as I turned off the main road and rolled into the strip mall parking lot, I got this sudden chill crawling up my arms, the kind that makes the hairs stand on end for no reason. The bowling alley was completely shut down. Not a single neon sign still buzzing. Just a few flickering parking lot lights casting long, twitchy shadows across cracked pavement. And under one of those lights was a man standing absolutely still. He was tall, probably 6'2", dressed in a gray hoodie and jeans. His hood was pulled low, and his head was tilted down like he was studying something on his sneakers. He didn't wave or step forward like most passengers do. He just stood there, his silhouette sharp and silent against the dirty yellow glow. My gut started whispering that something was off. Maybe it was the way his hands were jammed deep in his pockets, or the strange way his shoulders seemed too stiff like he was holding his breath. But I told myself I was just being paranoid. I rolled down the window and forced my voice to sound casual. You, Derek. And when he slowly lifted his face toward me, I swear it felt like the night itself was holding its breath. And that's when everything started to spiral into the kind of true horror story I never thought I'd be telling. The moment Derek slipped into the back seat, an icy draft seemed to follow him in, as though he was dragging a piece of the night along with him. He sat directly behind me, moving with this eerie, almost robotic stillness, like every joint in his body was locked into place. I caught a whiff of something sharp and metallic mixed with damp earth, like rain-soaked leaves after a storm or old blood. I started the ride, my eyes flicking from the road to the rearview mirror, hoping he'd pull out his phone or say something normal. But Derek just stared. Not at his phone, not out the window, but dead ahead, straight into the back of my skull. His eyes were wide and glinting in the dim glow of the dashboard, unblinking as if he was watching a movie only he could see. I tried to break the silence with the kind of harmless small talk I'd used on 1,000 rides. Rough night, I said, my voice wobbling despite me trying to sound casual. Derek didn't move for a long second. Then in this flat, hollow voice, he said, just needed to get out of there. Out of where, I asked, gripping the wheel tighter. His answer came after a pause so long I wondered if he'd heard me. Doesn't matter. I felt my stomach tighten, every nerve on high alert. The silence wrapped around us thick as fog, broken only by the low hum of my tires on the asphalt. And even though we were driving through empty streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that wherever Derek was going, it wasn't anywhere on the map. And that's when he leaned forward close enough that I could feel his breath on my neck and told me to turn off the route. About 15 minutes into the ride, the streetlights began to vanish behind us, one by one, until we were rolling through pure darkness, trees crowding both sides of the narrow road. My GPS said we were just a few minutes from the drop-off, but Derek suddenly leaned forward so close, I could see the pale reflection of my dashboard lights on his face. Actually, pull into that driveway right there, he murmured, pointing out the window. I glanced where he was pointing and felt my chest tighten. Off to the right was a crumbling driveway half swallowed by weeds leading up to a house that looked like it had been ripped straight from every urban legend I'd ever heard. The porch was sagging. The paint was peeling away in long, ragged strips, and the entire place sat in total darkness, like it was holding its breath. "Is this your place?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "Just pull in," he said in that same flat tone, not even blinking. Against every instinct screaming in my head, I turned into the driveway, tires crunching over loose gravel. I parked near the front steps and shifted into park, my pulse thundering in my ears. But Derek didn't move. He sat there staring at the front door like he was waiting for something or someone. After a moment that felt like a lifetime, he whispered, "Wait here," and stepped out into the night. Instead of heading to the front door, he drifted around the side of the house and disappeared into shadows so thick they looked almost alive. I stayed gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. But as the minutes dragged on, the silence pressing in around me, I started to wonder if Derek was ever coming back, or if something else was about to climb into my car instead. For the first few seconds after Derek disappeared around the side of the house, I sat there frozen, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The engine hummed softly in the silence, a weak reminder that at least the world hadn't completely stopped spinning. But in that moment, it sure felt like it had. I kept glancing at the house, half expecting Derek to come back around the corner, or for someone else to suddenly appear at one of the black vacant windows. My breath fogged the windshield in shallow bursts. I tried to tell myself this was just another weird ride. I'd had drunks, lovers, fighting people, sobbing in my back seat. But none of that felt anything like this. Every instinct in my body screamed that something was horribly wrong. The night felt too still, too thick, like the darkness itself was listening. My mind raced with possibilities. Was Derek scoping out the place to rob it? Was someone waiting inside? Or was there some other reason he'd picked a house that looked like it hadn't been lived in for 20 years? I pulled up the Uber app, hesitating, my thumb hovering over the end trip button. Technically, the ride was still going, but the longer I sat there, the more I felt like prey, sitting in an open field waiting for the predator to strike. Finally, my fear beat out my sense of professionalism. I ended the trip manually and shifted into reverse, telling myself I'd get the hell out before Derek came back. But before I could even move the car an inch, I caught sight of movement in my side mirror. Derek was coming back, and he was moving fast, his eyes shining with something that looked almost like excitement or hunger. Derek emerged from the shadows, like he'd been spit out by the darkness itself. His hoodie was slightly rumpled now, and as he strode toward the car, his footsteps were quick and deliberate, his eyes wide and glassy under the dim glow of my brake lights. My gut twisted into a tighter knot with every step he took. He yanked open the back door and slid into the seat without saying a word. For a second, I caught a glimpse of his hands and noticed they were trembling slightly. Flecks of something dark splattered across the cuffs of his sleeves. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it pulsing in my temples. "Take me to the other place," he said, voice low and urgent, leaning forward so close I could smell that same metallic tang, sharp and cold as a penny held in your mouth. I swallowed hard. "What? Other place? Just drive. I'll tell you." The tone in his voice made every nerve in my body light up like a live wire. I forced myself to keep my voice calm. "I can't take you anywhere unless you put it in the app." For a moment, he just stared at me through the rearview mirror, his eyes seeming to vibrate in place. Then his jaw clenched and he hissed, "Take me back where you picked me up." The relief that washed over me was almost dizzying, but it was laced with dread. The whole way back, I felt like I was driving with a loaded gun pointed at the back of my head. And even though he was silent, I could feel him watching me, breathing just a little too hard, as though he was winding himself up for something none of us would ever come back from. And that's when he finally broke the silence with words that chilled my blood. The ride back to the bowling alley felt like the longest 20 minutes of my entire life. The silence in the car was so heavy, it felt like it was pressing down on my chest, squeezing every breath out of me. I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, but I couldn't help flicking nervous glances into the rearview mirror every few seconds. Every time I looked, Derek was there, sitting completely still, his eyes glinting like glass marbles, staring right into the back of my skull. It was like sharing a car with a loaded gun. One false move, and I didn't know if I'd ever see my little girl again. My palms were slick against the steering wheel, and the sound of the tires humming over the asphalt felt impossibly loud. Trying to force some sense of normalcy into the air, I finally said, Rough night, huh? My voice cracked halfway through, betraying how close I was to losing it. Derek's head tilted slightly as if he was considering whether I was worth speaking to. You could say that he said his voice so quiet it was barely above a whisper. Everything okay? I tried again, praying he'd just give me a normal answer so I could pretend this was any other ride. He didn't blink. Not yet. And the way he said it, calm, almost conversational, felt like a knife sliding under my ribs. I drove the rest of the way in silence, gripping the wheel so tightly my fingers felt like they might snap. As we finally pulled back into the strip mall, the neon lights flickering weakly overhead, I thought the nightmare might be over. But that's when Derek leaned forward close enough that I could see the reflection of my own terrified face in his eyes, and he asked me a question that changed the way I'd look at strangers forever. I eased the car into the same spot under the flickering parking lot light where I'd first picked him up, my hands trembling as I shifted into park. For a split second, I allowed myself to believe this ride was over, that Derek would just get out, disappear into the shadows, and I'd never have to think about him again. But before I could even open my mouth to wish him a good night, Derek leaned forward so far that I could feel the brush of his hoodie against the back of my seat. His breath hit my neck in shallow bursts, icy and sharp, and his voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt louder than a scream. You ever wonder how you're going to die? My throat tightened until it felt like I was trying to swallow glass. A nervous laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it, brittle and hollow as dry leaves. Not really something I think about. I stammered, hoping he'd laugh too, or at least crack a smile. But Derek didn't laugh. His eyes were locked on me in the mirror, wide and glassy, like he was looking through me and into some dark future only he could see. For a few seconds, the silence stretched so long that it felt like the entire world had stopped breathing. Finally, he leaned back in his seat, still staring, and murmured, I think about it all the time. Then he pushed the door open, but didn't step out immediately. He stood half and half out of the car, one foot still on the floor mat, the other planted on the cracked pavement. And just as I thought maybe he was leaving for good, he turned his head and said the words that still chase me in my dreams. And in that instant, I knew that whatever Derek was, he wasn't just another rideshare passenger. For a few heartbeats, Derek just stood there, half inside the car, half out the glow of the parking lot, light casting sharp angles across his face. His eyes locked onto mine in the mirror, and in that moment it felt like the entire world had gone silent, except for the faint electric buzz of the dying neon sign overhead. Then he tilted his head ever so slightly, and in a voice as soft as a blade sliding from a sheath, he said, You picked the wrong guy up tonight. My skin crawled so violently, I almost expected it to tear itself from my bones. Derek stared at me for one last loaded second, then stepped backward and shut the door with a quiet click. I watched him as he drifted away into the shadows behind the bowling alley until he was swallowed completely by the dark. I sat there frozen, gripping the wheel, my pulse thundering in my ears. It took me almost a full minute to remember how to breathe. Eventually, my trembling fingers fumbled for my phone. I needed to check the ride details, needed proof that this nightmare had actually happened. But when I opened the Uber app, Derek's name was gone. The trip was gone. There was no record of me ever picking him up. No profile photo, no ride history, nothing but a blank screen, like the whole thing had been erased from reality itself. I called Uber support, desperate for answers, but all they said was that sometimes rides disappear if the app crashes or a passenger cancels mid-trip. But I know what I saw. I know Derek was real, or at least I thought he was. And sometimes late at night when my app pings for a pickup in some dark, empty parking lot, I wonder if Derek is out there somewhere, still looking for the right car. Because whatever he was, he sure as hell wasn't just a regular passenger. I'd love to tell you that after that night I never thought about Derek again. But that would be a lie. Because every time my phone buzzes at 2 a.m. with a pickup request from a dimly lit parking lot, I remember his eyes staring at me through the rearview mirror and the way he whispered, You picked the wrong guy up tonight. And I still can't shake the feeling that somehow I did. I've replayed that night in my head 1,000 times trying to figure out what Derek really was. Was he a ghost trapped between worlds, hitching rides just to feel alive for a few minutes? Was he a predator looking for someone more vulnerable and for some reason decided to spare me? Or was he something even stranger, a glitch in reality, slipping into my car from a place none of us can see? I guess I'll never know for sure. But one thing I've learned from driving strangers at night is this. The scariest people you'll ever meet don't always come with a weapon or a mask. Sometimes they just sit there quietly, watching, waiting, and whispering things you'll never forget. And the weirdest part, Derek's ride disappearing from the app isn't the only time I've seen something like that. Because not long after I picked up another passenger who was even stranger than Derek, and that's a story that still makes my skin crawl every time I tell it. But I'll save that for next time. So tell me this, if you were in my shoes that night, would you have kept driving, or would you have kicked Derek out of your car? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if creepy true stories, rideshare horror, and urban legends are your thing, make sure you hit that like button, save this video for later, and subscribe so you don't miss what happened on my next terrifying ride. Because trust me, things only get weirder from here.